In the dark days of the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln, seeking anything to provide some hope to a people who were experiencing death and destruction on a cosmic scale, declared that the fourth Thursday of November would be a day of Thanksgiving. It wasn't a new idea. He was honoring a tradition that was actually begun by our first president, George Washington, who not long upon taking office also suggested that would be a national day of Thanksgiving. You may not have been aware of it, but this past Thursday, we celebrated the 400th anniversary of the Thanksgiving feast in 1621, 400 years. It is sometimes true that the stories that give people their identity and their meaning are not always historically and factually accurate. George Washington, for example, did not chop down a cherry tree and go to his father axe in hand and say, "I cannot tell a lie." He also did not throw a silver dollar across the Potomac River, and if you've ever seen the Potomac River, you know that's just not going to happen. But one of our national myths, it is true. It's historically and factually correct, and that is the story of the first Thanksgiving feast. And I've loved that story since I was a child. We read it back in the day when Christmas still didn't start until sometime after December the 1st and didn't make you take out a second mortgage on your house. So, both of those things are not so new anymore. I love the pictures of the Pilgrims in black and white clothing, the Native Americans gathered around tables stacked with food, set against a Curionized background of snow in New England. And the more I learn about this story, the bigger it gets. I'm reading a book written about, 10 years ago, by Nathaniel Philbrick. It's called Mayflower, a story of courage, community, and war. And he did a lot of research into this story. I want to share some of it with you now. The settlers who constituted those New England colonists were an unusual bunch. Unlike those who'd made earlier attempts to settle the New World at Jamestown, these settlers were not nobility or artisans or servants. They were mostly families, members of a single congregation that was located outside of Dayton, Holland. Some English Puritans, or separatists as they later became called. Puritans because they were seeking to purify the Church of England of its problems, and separatists because they just wanted to be left alone. They went to Holland looking for religious freedom because back in those days, Holland was one of those places where you could go. It was run as a republic. The problem was that the Spanish were always trying to take Holland, so there was this constant warfare going on, and Leyden might find itself one day on this side of the line and the other day on the other side of the line. And if the Catholic monarch of Spain was your charge, you weren't going to have a lot of freedom to worship as you wanted to. And also, they had a problem because their children, who were born in Holland, were growing up to learn Dutch. And they didn't want them to learn Dutch. They wanted them to be good little Englishmen, even though they couldn't comfortably worship at home. And so they kind of set their sights on the New World. They thought they could set a colony there. And they had no illusions as to how hard and difficult that would be, because in 1607, at Jamestown, of the 109 people who settled that colony, 70 of them died in the first year of starvation or disease. They knew the odds. The next year, of the 500 colonists that went to Jamestown, 440 died of starvation or disease. In fact, by the time the Pilgrims boarded their ship to go over, of the 3,600 colonists who had settled in Jamestown, 3,000 of them had died. That's an 80% mortality rate. Pretty serious stuff. But the Pilgrims were not like those colonists that were settling in Jamestown. They weren't looking to get rich. They weren't trying to look for gold. They believed that God had called them to settle in the New World and that God would make a way for them. Their leader, William Bradford, wrote this: "We verily believe and trust the Lord is with us and will graciously prosper our endeavor. It is not with us as with other men, whom small things can discourage. We know that we are pilgrims," and hence the name, and it stuck, the Pilgrims. They sailed from Holland to Southampton, met up with a ship called the Mayflower. There were a few others who boarded there, their future governor, William Bradford, Miles Standish, who was hired to handle the military affairs of the colony. And after a few misadventures, on September the 6th, 1620, they began their voyage across the Atlantic. The voyage from England took over 2 months. There were 102 of them when they started, 25 additional crew and 2 dogs. Their possessions, such as they had, they kept in the hold of the ship. The Pilgrims, and presumably the dogs, lived in a space between the decks, a 5-foot-tall crawl space called the tweener. They separated it with little partitions for some privacy. It was a miserable and squalid place to live. They brought food and water and firewood and beer, which you needed because the water got bad pretty quickly and the beer was the only thing that was worth drinking. And they pretty much ran out of everything before they had landed. 2 of them died during the voyage. One woman of the 3 that were pregnant, Elizabeth Hopkins, actually gave birth to a boy. They averaged 2 miles an hour on their trip over. They encountered fierce storms. September is no time to be on the Atlantic Ocean. They had to repair a broken mast midway, almost turned back. The deck leaked water, the firewood and the food nearly ran out. A young man named John Howland tried to climb up on the deck one day to get a bit of fresh air. The wind blew him right off. He grabbed a rope on the way down and went 10 feet deep into the water until one of the sailors noticed the foaming and they saw the rope taut and they pulled him back in. He managed to survive and marry and eventually was the father of 10 children, an ambitious young man. On November the 9th of 1620, they finally sighted land. They decided to explore the coast, but before so, they did a remarkable thing. They wrote and signed a document called the Mayflower Compact, which essentially created a government based upon civil consent rather than divine decree. It is considered, along with the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, one of the 3 defining documents of American democracy. They didn't always live up to it, but in that moment they decided against a theocracy, against rule by divine right, against special religious prerogatives. Instead, they decided the government of the new colony would derive its power from the consent of the governed. It was a radical notion, never been tried before. At Providence, a small landing party put ashore 16 well-armed men. They fell on their knees in gratitude and prayed. They looked around, cut down some trees, went back to the ship, and enjoyed their first warm fire in 2 weeks. The next day was a Sunday, November the 11th or 12th, and they stayed on board that day to worship and pray, as was their practice. And then on Monday, they finally landed and disembarked. And the first thing the women did was find a pond with clean water to wash their clothes, which is why Monday has been wash day in New England for the last 400 years. They explored for a month, and finally they settled on a site where on December the 23rd, they began to build the first of 7 huts, which would eventually become the city of Plymouth. 52 of them died the next winter. They cleared and planted in the spring, with some friendly natives showing them how to do it right, and by September, they had a bumper crop of peas and corn and squash and barley so they could make beer again. There was great rejoicing, as they say. The harbor was filled with migrating birds, and by autumn, William Bradford wrote, they gathered the fruits of their labor, and then they took the time to rejoice together after a more special manner. He sent 4 men fowling, and they came back with enough geese and ducks to feed everybody for a week. They held a feast and invited the neighbors, perhaps remembering the harvest festivals of old England. In addition to vegetables and geese and ducks, they served striped bass, bluefish, and cod, which they caught off the scarp of land that forever bore the name Cape Cod. Massasoit, the local chief, arrived with 100 of his Pocono warriors, bringing 5 freshly killed deer and 2 wild turkeys. There was no pumpkin pie or cranberry sauce. There was also no tables or forks because they didn't have them. They ate with their fingers like they'd always done, and knives. That first Thanksgiving marked the conclusion of a remarkable year. 11 months before, they had arrived afraid, uninformed, uninvited. They spent the next months angering almost every Native American they met, and by any reasonable measure, not one of them should have survived the first winter. And yet they did. A testament to their grit, their resolve, and their faith. So they rejoiced together after a more special manner. And part of that gratitude was, of course, for the bounty and the beauty of creation, but part of it was the mere fact that they were alive. Like I said, it's a remarkable story, worth remembering, worth celebrating, worth telling our children about. And it's actually true. It reminds us that no matter how bad the circumstances, and the circumstances could have hardly been worse, there is always a reason to be thankful. Always. The bounty of creation is a basic biblical theme. In fact, on its very first page, the Bible says that God's creation is good. Now, sadly, we Christians, after about 4 centuries, decided to emphasize the brokenness of creation and the sinfulness of humanity. By that time, we pretty much decided God's creation was not good, and that the body was something that we needed to be delivered from with its unseemly tastes and needs. We forgot that creation was God's idea. Or as C.S. Lewis once quipped, material things have got to be good because, after all, God made them. Fortunately for us, when theologians forget this, the poets remind us. And the psalmists were poets. A lot of psalms celebrate the beauty of creation and its capacity to feed and sustain, to make us look out and wonder, to nurture our spirits, to reveal the bounty and the beauty of our God. When you look at creation, you get a glimpse of the Creator. And Psalm 65, which you read earlier, speaks of this. You visit the earth and water it. You greatly enrich it. You provide your people with grain, for so you have prepared it. You crown the year with your bounty. The pastures of the wilderness overflow. The hills gird themselves with joy. The meadows clothe themselves with flocks. The valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. The Bible promises there is always enough. There is always more than enough. The problem is we don't trust the promise of the Bible. Several years back, the National Geographic Society made a documentary about the lost boys of the Sudan. It was called God Grew Tired of Us. In the Sudan at that time, there was a war going on between the Muslims and the Christians, and I guess you could say the government, whatever it was. And a lot of families were displaced. Thousands of young boys, mostly under the age of 12, were separated from their parents, so they began a trek across the Sudan, which is not a very pleasant trek. The Sudan is mostly desert. It's the part of Egypt nobody wanted. Like, Michigan. It's part of Ohio nobody wanted, just so you know. Sorry about you Ohio State fans. A little sop there. They began that trek across the Sudan, the older boys helping the younger ones, and they walked 1,000 miles to Ethiopia, which is not exactly a garden spot. And in fact, while they were there, the Ethiopian government fell. And so once again, they trekked 1,000 miles to Kenya, where the United Nations finally settled them in a refugee camp. 25,000 of them, actually. At that time, the Western nations finally figured this was a problem we should do something about. And so the United States, along with other countries, just said they would take them in. They would take some of these lost boys in. By this time, they were in their teens and 20s. They were older. And the United States settled them. And so the lost boys came from the starkest poverty you could imagine. No running water, no electricity, constant starvation. They put them on planes. They flew them to modern cities across this country, and they gave them brand new apartments. They had never seen a refrigerator. They had no idea what running water was. They had no idea what a flush toilet was. They didn't know what those little things on the wall were for, flipping up and down. They had no idea. They'd never seen anything like it. So the film chronicled their first trip and getting used to things, and it showed their first trip to a supermarket. Now, imagine these lost boys walking in wonder and disbelief past mountains of fresh vegetables, counters running deep with meat, bread, sweets, a glass case filled with something called a donut with multicolored sprinkles that were sugary and sweet. They had never seen anything like this. It was beyond anything they could have imagined or dreamt of. For us, a quick run to Kroger's is an opportunity to complain about the fact that milk has gone up 9 cents a gallon and they've moved the damn toilet paper again, and you know it. What these folks saw was the bounty of creation and the miracle of God's goodness. Better Christians than we are, that's for sure. When we forget the promise of God's abundance, when we operate only out of a sense of scarcity, we become greedy and stingy and mean. We become afraid. We try to secure our future by obtaining things and then holding on to them with a death grip. In this country, we actually pay people not to grow food. While half the world starves, we pay people not to grow food on the richest farmland in the world. Oh, we read about abundance in the Bible, but we spend more time watching the stock market, whether it goes up or not, to see if our 401ks have gotten better or worse. We read the Bible on occasion, but every day we watch our iPads, our computer screens, and our TVs, and we see the ads that promise us that the guy who dies with the most toys wins. That's how we live our lives. But the Bible makes a radical promise that is economic and political implications. There is enough. There is more than enough because God has said so. And when that prosperity is shared, when loaves are broken and passed around, miracles happen. Hungry people are fed, and God is glorified. Thanksgiving in this country comes and goes so fast, we hardly notice it these days. We are in such a rush to get to Christmas. We are in such a hurry to spend all that accrued cash in our bank accounts before the supply line collapses. Don't tell me that's not what you're worried about. I know, I hear you talk. I read your Facebook posts. And we're missing the story here. We're missing the narrative. Those pilgrims were grateful to just be alive. We can't celebrate the bounty all around us if we can't be thankful that we're just alive. Because in case you haven't noticed, nearly 500,000 of us died of COVID in the last 12 months. That ain't nothing. Our lives are a gift, given every day. An opportunity for us to be God's people, to glorify God in whatever way we can. Again, it takes a poet to put this into word. The late Jean Kenyon, who died after a long battle with leukemia, wrote a poem called Otherwise. She wrote, I got out of bed this morning on 2 strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk with a ripe, fresh, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work that I love. At noon I lay down with my husband. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this one because one day I know it will be otherwise. St. Paul wrote to the Colossians, whatever you do, in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Because every day is an opportunity to give thanks. Thanks for the gift of your life. Thanks for the abundance of God's creation. Thanks for the gift of God's love given to us without condition or pause. There was a hymn written during the 30 Years' War by a Lutheran pastor named Martin Rinkert, the only pastor in the city of Eilenburg, a place of refuge for thousands during that war. The city was first taken by the Swedes, then by the Austrians, then retaken by the Swedes, and inside the walls of people were packed, and they suffered and they died from starvation and disease. In the year 1637 alone, Pastor Rinkert did 5,000 funerals, one of which was for his own wife. And so he wrote a hymn, this hymn, where thanksgiving literally erupts. And it seems an appropriate hymn to listen to today because it reminds us that no matter how bad the circumstances, and the circumstances under which this hymn was written could hardly have been worse, we are called to be a thankful people. Now thank we all our God. with hearts and hands and voices, who wondrous things has done, in whom this world rejoices, who from our mother's arms has blessed us on our way with countless gifts of love, and still is ours today. Oh, may this bounteous God through all our life be near us, with ever joyful hearts and blessed peace to cheer us and keep us in his grace, and guide us when perplexed, and free us from all harm in this world and the next. All praise and thanks to God, the Father now be given, the Son, and him who reigns with them in highest heaven, the one eternal God, whom earth and heaven adore, for thus it was, is now, and shall be evermore. Pilgrims on a journey, may we too rejoice together after a more special manner. To God be the glory. Amen.